So, today we're going to talk about political parties. The first thing we need to do is to identify what is a political party. And I've got the definition on the screen that these are people who have similar ideas on how the government should operate. Um, and in America, when we're talking about should gay marriage be legal or not legal? Should the government provide health care or not? Should the government protect the environment or should that be up to individuals? How should the government operate is the basis for what people are disagreeing about. So in America, we have a two-party system, and so we have Democrats and we have Republicans. Now we also have minor parties in America, but these are parties that are not very influential when it comes to making major decisions. We have two major parties, which is why it's called a two-party system. Now, whenever we look at these third parties, for the most part, have you heard of any of these? Or are they kind of ones that seem a little bit obscure? And that really comes back because third parties rarely win elections. They might win local or state elections. They might even win a U.S. Senate or House of Representatives. But they have never won a presidential election. And typically, third parties act as spoilers in election. The election in 1992, was it 92? Anyway, I'm going to double check on that. But it was between George Bush and Bill Clinton. So these two candidates were going against each other. George Bush was the incumbent, and that means he's the guy that's already president. So statistically, if we look at history, the incumbent is more likely to win, and there's a reason for that. We're going to talk about it later. George Bush should have won. However, this other guy comes in, an independent. His name is Ross Perot. And Ross Perot, while he's similar to George Bush, he's got more extreme viewpoints. Um, so what ends up happening in that race between George Bush and Bill Clinton and Ross Perot is that say Bill Clinton got 45% of the vote, George Bush got 40% of the vote, and then Ross Perot got 10% of the vote. Now, if Ross Perot had not been in the election, the 10% of Americans that voted for Ross Perot, that 10% would have gone to George Bush because he was the most similar normal candidate. And George Bush would have had 50% and he would have beat Bill Clinton. But because Ross Perot was in the election, he spoiled it, which is why he's called the spoiler. So, why do we even need political parties? It's to help organize people so that if we were to put people in a category of all the people who are in favor of gay marriage being legal and all the people who are not in favor of it, or if we wanted to connect the different levels of government, that the Democrats who work in the town are going to talk to the people who work the other Democrats who work in the county, and those Democrats at the county level are going to talk to the Democrats at the state level, and the state level Democrats are going to talk to the national level Democrats, and the same thing for Republicans. Now they also watch the opposing party, so that Republicans watch Democrats and to see what they're doing wrong. And right now Democrats are watching Donald Trump like crazy and they're constantly trying to point out his flaws, just like Republicans were watching Barack Obama and constantly pointing out his flaws. Political parties also inform citizens of what's going on. They let people know events that are happening, or if somebody's doing something wrong, or if they're going to tattletale on the other one. And they also help candidates, political parties. So the National Democratic Party, they help raise money for like Hillary Clinton when she ran against Donald Trump, and when Barack Obama ran against Mitt Romney, or any of these other opponents that he's had. Now, so if we go back and we look at the history of political parties, the very first thing, as soon as we get our Constitution written, it becomes official. They had already been arguing over, and they were going to continue to argue over it. And so our very first political parties, which some people might argue about, but we're going to, for the basics of basics, we're going to say that our first political parties were our Federalists and our Anti-Federalists. And so they were arguing over, how do we even write the Constitution? Should we have more power or less power belonging to the federal government or state government? Later, once the Constitution is written, you can't really call yourself anti-federalist. However, because if you're anti the government, well, should you be the leader of the government? But is what exactly does the Constitution mean in this part? And so the very people who sat down and wrote the Constitution later end up arguing over what exactly it means. So of course we're going to continue arguing about it today, right? If we're going to look at Democrats, they are the oldest party. They were established in 1792. And they are famous for establishing Social Security, which helps disabled and retired citizens, as well as the welfare system. They also signed the Civil Rights Act in 1964, which said that African Americans needed to be treated fairly. Typically, whenever Democrats are in office, they increase how much money they spend on things, which means overall our government spending increases, and we have more government programs versus Republicans, which were established in 1854. I forgot something very important. Let me pause for a second. When we look at our mascot over here, why are the Democrats a donkey? That would go to our 7th president, Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson was, well, kind of trashy, I guess would be the best way to say this. I always struggle with what word to use. And he, when he was elected, he was called like the common man's president. And when he says when he becomes president, he's going to invite everybody to the White House. And he does. He says, "Y'all come on up." And he tells people they are welcome to come to the White House. And they were tearing the White House up. They're taking paintings down. People were regular, like, trashy type people were standing on the couches, and so much so, like, just tearing the White House apart, that the slaves were very concerned that they were going to burn the White House down. And so the slaves actually saved the White House, and by beckoning out these trashy, terrible people who voted for Andrew Jackson. Say terrible, they're the common man. But anyway, the slaves said, "Y'all come out here, we got some lemonade and some ice cream." And people were like, "Woo, we got lemonade and ice cream," and they went outside. But Andrew Jackson did not get along with Congress at all. They wouldn't take his advice, and he had to have his cabinet approved by the Senate, which we've already talked about. Anyway, he didn't like those people, so he decided to appoint his own people, and they called themselves the Kitchen Cabinet, and they met in the kitchen in the White House. Anyway, so Congress said that Andrew Jackson was acting like a donkey, and that's where that comes from. It's from Andrew Jackson and his very trashy self. He actually wasn't very trashy, but anyway, his supporters were kind of the common man. So let's get over here to the Republicans. The Republicans call themselves the GOP, which stands for the Grand Old Party, even though they are not the oldest party because they were established in 1854. Now, Lincoln tried to save the Union, and he wanted to get rid of slavery. Abraham Lincoln was our first Republican president that we had. And the Republicans have had the first African American and the first female ever elected to a national level. Now, why do we have the elephant over here? That comes from a guy named Thomas Nast, who drew a cartoon of the donkey, and he just drew an elephant and put GOP on it and Bob's your uncle. And it just kind of just stuck around. Typically, when Republicans are in office, they try to spend less money. So if you're looking at, like right now, Donald Trump being president, as a Republican, he is going to be trying to slash spending. So one of his earlier quotes, he said, for every government program created while he was president, they needed to get rid of two programs. So one for two type thing. Um, and typically, Republicans do a good job of cutting back spending on things that they view unnecessary, whereas Democrats tend to spend more money on social programs. All right, so here are some famous Democrats. I'm going to name these off because you definitely need to know who they are. Now, I'm going to say them even though I'm sure you know some of them. We have Oprah Winfrey. We have Hulk Hogan. We have John F. Kennedy. We have Barack Obama. We have Hugh Hefner. Yes, he is the owner of Playboy. We have Tom Hanks. And yes, he's been in quite a few movies. You should watch them. He's a great actor. And then we have Michael Jordan. All of these are Democrats. Then we also have some famous Republicans. We have Chuck Norris. And we have Carl Malone, Adam Sandler. We have, drawing a blank. Clint Eastwood, there we go, who a lot of my students no longer know who Clint Eastwood is. However, you should definitely check out his son, who is an up-and-coming actor, and he is quite handsome. Then we have The Rock. We have Mitt Romney. Now, this guy right here was the guy who ran against Barack Obama in 2012. And then we have Ice Cube over here. So, how do we know what a political party believes? Each political party is responsible for writing out their platform. Their platform are all the statements saying so that, like, what do Republicans believe about gay marriage? What do Republicans believe about abortion? What do Republicans believe about crime? What do Republicans believe? Every single issue that there is. Each individual part, just like what we have right here, so like gay marriage, how do Republicans feel about that? How do Republicans feel about war? How do they feel about taxes? Each individual plank is each individual issue. But all together, all the planks make up the platform. Republicans have this, Democrats have it, all political parties have to have this. Even like the Black Panther Party and the KKK, they all have a platform, and all of them you can go and you can read, and I welcome you getting informed and reading about them because that's your job as a citizen. So now, what do Republicans and Democrats believe? So I've got my T-chart. Over here we have Democrats, which don't have another name. On Republicans, we have our GOP, which, if you recall what that stands for, hopefully you wrote it down. It stands for the Grand Old Party, even though they're not the oldest. So Democrats are more liberal, they're more open-minded and more quick to change things. Versus Republicans tend to be more conservative, more let's continue doing things the way that they've worked, and not as quick to change things because they just like how things were done in the past. Democrats are pro-choice, which means they're for the choice of the woman to choose whether or not she wants to have a child or not. And Republicans are for the life of the baby, saying that the life of the baby, the life of a human being, is more valuable than the woman's choice. Democrats are for gay marriage, believing, for the most part, that people should have the right to choose who they want to get married to. And Republicans want to go with the concept that marriage is between one man and one woman. Now, if you notice so far, out of the things that we've talked about, that really they both fall underneath the liberal and conservative, that Democrats are very much let people live how they want to, and Republicans tend to be a little bit more let's keep things the way that they've always been. Democrats are in favor of having government-regulated health care. It's called a universal health care. And Republicans tend to be for private health care, that you should pay for your own, and if you can pay for better, then you get better health care, and if you can't, well, then that there should be a bare minimum requirement. Democrats are for more gun control, and so what that means, a lot of people, they get this mixed up because Republicans want less gun control. Now Republicans are saying let you choose the right of whether or not of how you want to defend your family with a gun or not. And Democrats typically want more restrictions on gun control. So Democrats want more gun laws, less guns. If that makes sense. And Republicans are going to say less gun laws, but more guns. I'm sorry, that's probably not a good way to explain it, but students usually end up getting confused. Democrats are for the idea that public schools should be there and or be there for everybody to make sure that there's no discrimination. And Republicans want there to be choice and that you shouldn't be forced to go to a school somewhere. Democrats are for affirmative action, and affirmative action means that if there is a white man and a black man and they're both equally qualified for the job, then the African American needs to be considered for the job because there's been so many times in which white males have been given a privilege just because they're white males. And when we look at that, there's evidence to support that claim of like people who have names like John or Thomas are more likely to get a job than people who have ethnic sounding names, which, while that's not fair at all, is one of the things that we categorize people as human beings. Republicans generally think that affirmative action creates reverse discrimination. That if I have a son, is it his fault what his race is? Of course not. Well, then should we punish him for something that he is not responsible for? So both sides, I think, probably have good points, and hopefully I've explained those to you. Democrats spend more government money, which we've just said, and Republicans tend to spend less. Democrats usually increase the size of government versus Republicans try to decrease the size of government. Democrats raise taxes generally. They usually go up about 1.2% while Democrats are in office, and Republicans do everything they can to cut taxes for everybody. Democrats are pro-environment. They're very much, save the whales, recycle. And it's not that Republicans are against it. It's just not one of their platforms that they speak strongly about. Democrats usually support putting less money towards the military and putting more money towards government programs, versus Republicans say, no, we need to make sure that America is protected. Democrats are for labor unions, which are going to look out for the workers that belong to a company. And Republicans are going to say, let's make it easier for businesses to get a hold, because if there's more businesses and people can have more money because they have jobs. Labor unions tend to make it so that the company isn't making as much money. Democrats are against the death penalty, thinking that it's cruel and unusual, versus Republicans tend to be tougher on crime. Democrats also tend to be secularist, and so what that means is that rather than basing your decisions on religion, your decisions are going to be based on logical things. So that if I found $20 on the floor, if I'm secularist, then that means I'm probably going to think that someone dropped this. And it's not necessarily meant for me to pick up so much as I just happened to find it. Versus Republicans would say, nope, God meant for me to find this. That's probably not also a good example. Just trying to come up with it. Republicans do tend to... they're just more religious, and that kind of goes back to gay marriage and abortion choices as well. And Democrats are more likely to think of, an example of one would be, so a friend of mine was electing, he was voting. He didn't know if he was going to choose between George Bush and whoever he was running against. I'm drawing a blank on who it was. The guy who said Al Gore. So when George Bush was running against Al Gore, my friend his name was Dwayne, and Dwayne was going back and forth between, he didn't know who he was going to vote for, and then one day he heard that George Bush said that he was just going to pray and and hoped that he became president. And Dwayne said that was very important to him, that he wanted a president who prayed. And so that kind of makes Dwayne a little bit, or he's Republican, based off that just one sentence that pushes him towards the Republican side, because that says that religion is very important to him, and that's how he decided to pick who was president, or that's how he decided who he was going to vote for. Democrats tend to be blue collar. When we say blue collar, we're talking about, I always picture someone that's working with their hands. So like mechanics, construction workers, garbage trucks workers, people who are out there in the nitty gritty working, like firemen and police officers are considered to be blue collar, versus Republicans tend to be white collar, and those tend to be jobs that require a higher level of education. Lawyer, doctor, accountant, teacher could all fall under Republican. Now, looking at this, hopefully you've gone back and forth, and whenever you're looking at this, you've got to decide, where are you? Now, for some of these issues, if you are like most people, maybe you're for something on this side, but you don't agree with them, or you don't agree something on this side that's over here. Maybe you're kind of in the middle. Well, there's actually a spectrum. A spectrum is kind of, well, it's a line of what we're going to do. Is we're going to call this the political spectrum. And so when we're looking at someone like Joe Biden, a lot of people love Joe Biden, and there's a reason why people love Joe Biden. It's because what we have here, you're going to need to draw this, by the way. I'm just going to go ahead and put all these out here. A lot of people really love Joe Biden. It's because he's really close to moderates. So if we were to write this out, about 40% of the country are going to be considered Democrats, and about 40% of the country are going to be considered Republicans. Well, if you got 40 and 40, where's the other people? Well, here you have your 18% that are going to be right here in the middle. And most Americans fall somewhere between right here and right here. Most Americans are in this category. Well, you do have your less than 1%, which are your extremists, if you will. Your people who are a little bit, the zombies are coming, we need to, we need to prepare. And so that's why when we say, like, why do people really love Joe Biden? Well, there's lots of reasons, but the fact that he's closer to being a moderate is one of the reasons why Barack Obama, who's a little bit more liberal over here, why did Barack Obama pick this guy to be his vice president? Well, it helps out a great deal that he's very moderate. Now, at the time, whenever we made this, we did not put Donald Trump up here because he was wavering between whether or not he was a Democrat or Republican. However, Donald Trump is pretty close to being a moderate. Although he used to be a Democrat and then he switched over to be a Republican. However, some of the things that he's saying push him a little bit this way, but he's also trying to get people who are over here on his side. Now, why did we put like Ted Cruz and Ben Carson? Psst, you're writing these names down. Like Ben Carson has said like the cure for AIDS is to, to put all these people in one place and just prevent them from touching other people pretty much, which is a little extreme. Most people wouldn't consider that to be a rational idea. Bernie Sanders is considered, like, the closer you get to the left side, the more government, and the closer you get to the right side, the less government. So Bernie Sanders is very much the government should get involved in lots of things, like Bernie Sanders believing that college should be paid for by the government. That's going to push him over here. Every single person that you know is somewhere on this line. Your parents are up here, your grandparents, your Uncle Bob is up here. Every single person is going to be on this line somewhere. So you are on this line, and what you have to do is look at that T-chart and kind of figure out where you are. Hopefully that by this point you've already taken the isidewith.com survey, and that's going to help put you on here too, and that can help lead you in the right direction of who should you vote for. Because while I've tried to do my very best in not being biased and making sure I'm explaining this well, just in case something came across as biased or not, I really truly want you to be informed and understanding what's going on. So when we're talking about like the communists, these are people who want complete control of everything. And if you're a communist, okay, that's fine. However, I really want you to understand what you are so that you can vote for the right people. Because if you're a communist and you're voting for Ted Cruz, then you're not doing what you think is best for the country. You're misinformed. And I think it's really, really important for you to be informed. So if you want to do what Ted Cruz is suggesting, which is a whole lot of less government, let's get rid of the IRS type stuff, then that means that you should understand what he's saying. So how does the political spectrum affect the campaigns? Well, let's look at it. Oh, Barack Obama, Mitt Romney. Yep, there we go. Oftentimes, candidates will campaign as moderates. And the reason why they're campaigning as moderates is because they want to make the opposition look like extremists. So that when Donald Trump was campaigning, he was trying to make Hillary Clinton look like she was extreme. She was going to do radical things. She was going to just, not know what to do and just make irrational decisions. And when Hillary Clinton was campaigning against Donald Trump, she was saying the same stuff about him, that he didn't know what he was gonna. We couldn't predict him, that he was wild and would say things that perhaps it would be uncalled for or have a terrible reaction. They're both making wild claims about each other, and they're trying to do that because they're trying to make their other person look bad. If they can claim to be moderates, if Donald Trump is going to win these 40% of the people who are on this line, and he gets the moderates, which is 18%. Well, 40 plus 18, he'd get to 58, and that would mean that he would win the election. If Hillary Clinton gets the 40% of Democrats, and then she gets 18, that means that she would win if she had 58% of the votes. So it's incredibly important for them to try to say, hey, moderates, I need you on my side. Which is why someone like Donald Trump made sense from the Republican standpoint, because he used to be a Democrat. So he is actually pretty moderate. And a lot of Republicans said he wasn't conservative enough, which is why he picked Mike Pence, who is rather conservative on this side. Why did Hillary Clinton pick her candidate? Is because he, again, was closer to moderates. And so she was trying to grab the people in the middle. All right, so that's all. Oh, sorry, we have got this cartoon right here. So we've got an elephant, we've got a donkey. I'm more bipartisan. You know I'm more bipartisan. Bipartisan means that we have two parties and they're both trying to work with each other and they're both saying, no, I'm better, I'm fair, no, I'm fair, and going back and forth. And when in actuality, are either one of them bipartisan? And then your assignment is to read George Washington's farewell address.